Andrew, do you mind if I ask you the question I posed just a little bit earlier about the tension between your ideals and your will to have traction in the institution and to provide a critique of the institution? How is that tension unfolding for you?
I think that thought is rooted in the kind of material structures in which it occurs, and that if one aspires to do critical intellectual work, then the location of that thought and that intellectual work is not is in some sense inextricable, although we as academics want to make it very extricable. And so for me, as someone who's interested in critical analysis of culture and society, the conditions of my own intellectual work and the labor relations in which that occur have to have points of critical intersection that isn't just lip service. And so graduate student organizing is, to me, the only really effective way to do it.
I guess I would maybe answer it very differently from Andrew, because I feel like the only thing that I can sort of see in the fact that I have ideals and then that they aren't realized by the place that I occupy in the institution, right? And that I have this sort of desire to act in a particular way is that it impels me to action, right? That in terms of my experience, it's sort of necessary to do something to reach those ideals, even if there is no guarantee that they will ever be reached, which I don't know if that should be maybe a warning to universities, right? That people feel that way to some extent, or I feel that way, right? That the place that I'm in just sort of impels me to action when there's this complete tension between the mental state that I hold and the things that I think and the sort of physical reality in which I'm in.
Just, I guess, another way of answering more specifically to your question about how I would reconcile my interests in terms of improving conditions of work versus, or in conjunction with transforming the university as a whole. I guess I would say part of where I see the node of these two sides of interest coming together is on the notion of work as something that I think doesn't have to be understood as something that you just have to do in order to live, but too much so is seen that way, and I think it's certainly not because we have to just become reconciled with the work as it is, but because the work really isn't as good as it could be.
I wonder if we could talk a little bit about pushback. What sort of pushback do you encounter when you do the work of the group? Pushback from other graduate students, other graduate employees, from the administration, from your advisors?
I have a story about that. So I have a friendship, actually, with one of my colleagues at the Divinity School that has gone a little sour over the fact that I am doing graduate student organizing. And it has a lot to do with the decisions that the university made about how they were going to deal with the funding issues. Sort of more recently, where they decided to give the department some choices about how they were going to fund current students. One of the choices that they gave was the cash for slots option, in which you could cut the incoming class in order to fund current students. So the program that I'm in, most second-year master's students petition to continue on into the doctoral program. And sort of, there's something of a guarantee like made to you, not really a guarantee, and it's a little overinflated. You know that you buy the MA and you'll get into the PhD program. And so many people come here expecting to do that, as my friend undoubtedly did, and he has been promptly waitlisted because of the fact that they cut the number of slots that they were allowing in to the program. So I've been, promptly told that my activism on this issue has only hurt our fellow graduate students because of the types of restrictions that the university has pushed on to the departments. How do you deal with a friend who's angry with you over structural issues that you feel like you're only working for the benefit of your friend, and they don't seem to understand. They aren't interested in understanding. They could only sort of feel the disappointment that they felt about, their future plans kind of being dashed.
I mean, I've had at least one informal conversation with a faculty member, and was, to be honest, quite disheartened and to a certain extent taken aback by the sense that that graduate work is a privilege, and that to think of it as labor is to reduce it to other forms of labor which are not self-actualizing forms of labor, and therefore, I mean, it was an informal conversation, but I mean, sort of the gist of it was that unionization for grad students really isn't appropriate because it's just not that kind of work. And then I guess in terms of my peers, as I said, I'm a first year who's coming into the institution with a new funding package, and certainly this isn't true of all my peers, but with some of them there's a sense that it's a form of ingratitude to think about being critical or organizing, because we know what wage labor outside the academy is like. We know what it's like to work in the service industry and restaurants and so on, and to be offered a lump sum of money simply to do intellectual work is a great privilege, and it would take a sort of bitter ideologue to somehow question that. And so I find that a very frustrating attitude to encounter, and really the de facto outcome of that attitude, although couched in a kind of couched in a sense of modesty, is I've got mine. So the fact that they're second years, third years, fourth years who are in a bad position isn't on my radar.
The outcry was for a kind of equity, and there were some of my friends at that point started feeling like they were frustrated with the kind of tone of this outcry that they thought had a kind of a sort of sense of bourgeois entitlement. We're among the smartest people in the world, and therefore we deserve $19,000 a year because of that. And some, like one of my close friends, his father was a union worker all his life in heavy industry, and his mother was also, and he definitely supports labor organizing in general, but was very frustrated with the way it was being presented at this initial moment. That's partly why I saw organizing as a better answer than advocating just for better stipends.
It can be profoundly frustrating, or maybe the word is infuriating, to talk to people who are getting enormous fellowships from outside of the university, who don't seem to think that it's their business to lift a finger over people who aren't getting as much money as they are, who haven't, I would be the last person to say that I think the way that they select the recipients of these fellowships is entirely rational, and even if it were, you'd still have to ask whether a meritocracy was a good thing to begin with. So I mean, to me, it seems totally arbitrary and quite maddening that there are some people who, otherwise I would like, who are impossible to reach consensus with on this issue.
What are you, Antonio or something?